to the second episode of Steptoe's Garage. My name is John Lakeland and this is my 1938 Triumph Dolomite Special. This car left the Triumph factory in Coventry in 1938, came to Australia as a beautiful four-door saloon. Now that was one stage of life, had three stages over it. The second stage got to about 1950. The car was sold to a Mr. Keith Werner of South Australia, who was an avid Triumph, Pre-War Triumph collector. He purchased the car and drove it for a number of years, deciding that the body in those days, the roads weren't very good, rattled apart, and he thought it was due for a new body. So mechanically the car was very good, so he decided to build his own special, which turned out to be a slab-sided, a bluey grey saloon, or a tourer with a sort of folding roof, very much like a Landau type looking car. Well, there'll be a photo in the video of this car, and he then drove this car. He did it with very minimum tools and equipment. He worked in a one-car garage, and he used to joke that he built it with a hammer and a hacksaw, and some of the parts looked like that. There wasn't many curved panels on it, it was very straight, but it was a credit to his engineering and ability, given the tools and the time he built it. Well, he had the car for 65 years. He drove it to many club events all around Australia, and it was well known in old car circles in Australia. Well, the time comes, it does with everybody. Keith got to a fair age. He had been in care for a little while, and he rang me and said, John, would you like to come over to South Australia and talk to me about my car? Well, I didn't know Keith all that well at that stage, but I knew of him, and I decided to go over to South Australia, and it was for the British Car Festival. So we had a lot of things in common to talk about anyway, and somewhere during the day Keith said to me, well, I'm going to take this bit of paper up to the loudspeaker, and I'm going to announce that anybody wants to buy my car. And that was Keith's cue for me to offer him something for the car and say, actually, I was interested. Well, to cut a long story short, in about an hour's time I bought the car. So about 2 weeks after that, I travelled to South Australia. We loaded up the car with about 3/4 of a tonne of spare parts that Keith had accumulated from years and years of finding old cars and wrecking cars, and we brought it back to Melbourne. And I then had the car roadworthied and registered on my club registration, and drove it for many years to club events. Well, it went well. In fact, my wife said it was a very comfortable car, and she doesn't say that about many of my cars, but it went down well. As far as everybody was very impressed with the fact that it had done probably about 660,000 miles at that stage, because I did quite a few in its 65 plus years. So the body sort of let it down a bit, and it wasn't terribly attractive, and I didn't want to offend Keith by modifying it while he was alive. But a couple of years ago Keith passed at 90 years of age, and I thought, well, I'll put the car into storage for a while and I'll think about its future. It was mechanically such a good car, you could hop in it and drive to Sydney, which is 700 miles away. So it's a very reliable car, starts every time. And I put it away thinking, well, if I change the colour and I put some curved mudguards on it, it might be more appealing. So nothing happened for about 2 or 3 years while I was working on other cars. Then one day I got a call from a friend or from a friend's brother. He died, and he said, I've got some stuff for you in his shed. And I was chasing some parts, and I'd given Malcolm some parts, Malcolm was his name, given Malcolm some parts that his brother no longer wanted, and I could pick them up. So I travelled to his shed just before Christmas, probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, and was looking at some Jaguar motors and a Fiat chassis that I'd given Malcolm. Anyway, cut a long story short, I was walking in the dark shed, hit my head on something hanging from the rafters. Well, what I hit my head on was this body hanging from the rafters. And I said to his brother, where the hell did this come from? And he said, Malcolm had collected this years and years, we couldn't remember how many years, but 30, 40 years ago, and from somewhere. And Malcolm was an avid collector. He was one of these people that never did anything with it, but he collected it, and he used to keep it he was fairly secretive about the amount of stuff he had. So no one had seen this body for a long time. Anyway, another long story short, I ended up buying it. So half an hour later, money to exchange hands, and I had it in the back of my ute, and I brought it home and hung it in my workshop, where I previously had a Grand Prix Samson body hanging there, but one of my friends bought it off me, so that disappeared, so this took its place. So it was hung up as a 1940 odd racer special. So that was fine. I went on holidays up at Lake Eildon for a couple of weeks, and being out of the workshop gave me some time to think about what I was going to do with Keith's car. And then probably after a few beers, I decided that I've got a lovely engineered car underneath this old body, and I've got a lovely body which could be quite exciting if it's put together in the right form, and to do the transformation was quite feasible. They were both from the same era, and I'd always wanted a pointy tail Triumph race car, so the seed was sown, and after my holidays I came straight back to Melbourne, pulled this thing down from the ceiling and laid it on the floor, and that's where the work started. The first thing I had to do was to work out how to put this body on top of the old chassis running gear and that. So I wanted to keep it as original as possible, and I wanted to keep it basically the same car with a different dress basically. It sounds easy, but it took a lot more work because this body was actually a bit short, and we had to cut the panels, put some more panels in, had to build a whole bonnet for it. The nose had to be narrowed down, and the doors had to be extended because people in those days were obviously a lot shorter than I was. But anyway, that took about a year of work, and I'll go through in detail what we did. But basically, after it was completed, I was really happy with the result, and the car has done a number of shows and has been very well received. And I've actually been to Perker-Lilly in Western Australia, and it's taken place in the 1923-22 Red Dust Revival, which you'll find a photo attached. And the car went well. Two of us drove it and raced it for 7 days straight, and without a breakdown, and the car is still running as it is today. The only modification we made, had to put extra air filters on to stop the red dust ingress. After that, I think we'll go through, look through the car in some detail now, and we'll go from there. The interesting thing about this body, it was hand built sometime in the 1940s, and it was made from old drums welded together. So when you look at the curves, you can see how pieces there are far from cylinders. So it's actually been all brazed together, and there's certain points where you can actually see the rough brazing work all through here, right down there, and it's all made from old steel and fairly rusty underneath. So we tried to really keep the body looking like it did in the old days, so we didn't scrape it back, clean it, polish it, grind it. We left it as it is, but we had to modify it. The body actually was 9 inches short. The section there to there had to be added in, and inside the doors we had to add in 6 inches between the doors, and at the front we had to narrow the car by 3 inches through the section here. But apart from that, we didn't modify it much at all. And of course I happened to have some mud guards which seemed to suit. They were old trailer guards that I'd have hanging around for a while. So the whole lot, the body wise, we had period headlights in my spare parts, period parking lights, and aero screens came from another old car. So we were able to put this car together using old parts similar to would have been used in the time, and of the same sort of patina that this car would have expected to be in this age. So you can see the seats have been kept as they were, a little bit of grease put on them, but with all the cracks from the driver's side still there. And as you come around here, you'll see the dashboard is made of some odd instruments, but basically old reused parts that are from my collection. The back of the car, one little change for modernity, we had to put this, because this car is registered, we had to put decent stop lights and brake lights and indicator lights on it, which is these LEDs you'll see here. Petrol tank is behind the seat as it was in the old days. Wheels are traditional 18-inch Rudge 52 lock-ons with 14-inch Lockheed hydraulic brakes. The front part is basically a mesh grille, as they were, pretty simple, nothing special, with a couple of driving lights in front of it. And there, that's actually the original badge from the 1938 Triumph Dolomite. You may ask yourself what this weird thing on the front is. That was just too many beers one night, and I found this I put my hand into a Lee Francis motor that I had and pulled this out without taking the sump off or anything. It had broken, the crankshaft had obviously gone around the piston, it got stuck, and I managed to pull this out, and I thought, well, I'll do something with it. And because I didn't have a mascot, I thought, why not? It's a bit of fun. When people open the bonnet, they see the Triumph insignia on the rocker cover, and the most often say, well, that's the same insignia as the Triumph motorbike. Well, of course, the fact is, when this was built, the Triumph companies, they originally built the motorbike, so they had the same insignia. It was only later on in life that the motorbike section was sold off, and the car part was then sold, the car section was then sold to standard motor cars. So everything, including the wheels, which is a bit hard to see in this one, the wheels, the spinners have Triumph on them. A bit hard to see in that one. Maybe the rear one might be a better one to look at. So these wheels, of course, were used on many English cars of the period, and they're 18-inch Rudge 52, and basically the same as appears on Lee Francis, a lot of other cars. I can't quite think of Aston Martins, and quite a few others. But what we've done here, we've got an original old tonneau cover in here and a toolbox here, because there's no room inside the car, and I wanted to be able to drive it on the road, take it to rallies, and be prepared if I do have a breakdown I can change it or repairs. So we'll go and look now. We'll go to have a look at the other side of the car, and okay, this is the other side, the inlet side of the motor, which consists of two 1 1/4 or 1 1/8 SU carburetors. Everything's pretty conventional. It's a standard generator system, and if you look right down here, you can see the original engine plate, and then up here on the firewall you can see the original ID plate. So that was quite interesting to keep the car together. So it has a history, so we have preserved the history, but I think I've made it a bit more an interesting package. So conventionally it's an ENV differential, 4-speed ENV gearbox, made by Triumph. The motor was all built by Triumph. The front end is unique for Triumph. The leaf springs have the shackles at the front, not the rear. It's a bit hard to see on this car, which sometimes is a disadvantage. Other things to have note are I could not find any side steps in my collection, so I happen to have these caustic soda lids which came off the drums of caustic soda 100 odd years ago, and I thought they'll do the job, and so I happen to have two of them, so that's why they're on there. I was going to call it the caustic soda special for a while, but that seemed to have different connotations, like it might have rusted away. So it's basically just a Triumph special. I think the steering wheel and everything is all pretty consistent with period. The drivetrain, the gearbox, the handbrake is all pretty standard. I have a toolbox there, a tool bag on the other side for putting tools and some paperwork. So this car is registered and is driven not daily, but driven to events. So I need to have those sort of things like my club registration, paperwork, and all that is always handy. So next we'll probably do a drive-by so you can see it operating.